We're going to talk about the top 5 reasons why a contract goes south or why a real estate contract is canceled. And we're going to talk about ways to avoid that, whether you're a buyer or a seller, and the consequences of doing that. A lot of you out there just think you can cancel a contract and there's no repercussions, and we're going to talk about some of those consequences that you want to be aware of and avoid. For those of you who may or may not know me, my name is Audra Lambert, and I am one of the top selling realtors out here in good old Orange County, California. And I tell you that not to brag, but I'm telling you that to establish some credibility on this subject. I have sold over 250 homes in my area, and out of those 250 homes, and I'm not kidding, I've only backed out of escrow 10 times. And that might even be an exaggeration. Like, I don't like backing out of escrow. Okay, here in California, we have escrows. For those of you who don't, you just would cancel a contract, I think is what you say. But anyway, that's a very, very good track record. Now, out of those 10 properties that have actually canceled the contract, 2 of those actually happened last month. So I'll share that experience with you at the end of this video. I think it's going to be beneficial, and we're starting to see an increase of buyers and sellers canceling contracts. So let's talk about the top 5. The number 1 reason why a contract gets canceled is because that buyer can't qualify for a loan. Now, for those of you who are very loyal to my channel and watch me regularly, you know how much I dislike the lending institution. Now, I'm not saying lenders are bad. I mean, they all work hard, I'm sure. But the problem with it is that there are just too many things that can go wrong when you're working with the lender, okay? The appraisal may not come in at value. The underwriter may not approve, or they might have just a plethora of conditions that the buyer has a hard time meeting. There may not be enough reserves for the buyer to qualify. There are a million reasons why working with the lender could have a reason for the cancellation of the contract because the buyer just can't qualify. So if we know that the number 1 reason that the contracts get canceled is because the buyers can't qualify for a loan, let's smarten up, guys. Let's make sure we have a higher probability for success. So for you sellers out there, when you get an offer, you want the buyer to cross-qualify with a trusted lender, okay? Most of the buyers that I know happen upon something on the internet and they're not going with a great company. I mean, not always, obviously. But I would highly suggest that if you're a seller and quite frankly, the listing agent, you want to cross-qualify that buyer with a trusted lender, preferably somebody that can turn that loan around very quickly if the first loan can't get approved. Now, I can't tell you how many deals I have saved because I implement this strategy. As a listing agent, as soon as I even get the slightest hint that there could be something going sideways with that buyer's lender, I will immediately contact the second lender in place. They already have the buyer qualified. They can jump in and close the deal in a very, very quick period of time. Time is of the essence, okay? So let's say that buyer doesn't qualify with that first mortgage company. They have to start the whole process over. But if you do pre-qualify them and cross-qualify them with a second mortgage company, that second mortgage company, I'm not kidding, most of the time will come in and rescue the deal. But the key is you got to start the process simultaneously with the first lender. Please understand the significance of that. If you're a buyer, make sure you get fully underwritten loan approval. And if you're working with the lender that does not offer that, you fire them and go find somebody else that you can work with who will provide that for you because it's a lot more work for them. And second of all, you need to make sure that they can get full loan approval within 10 to 12 days. Most lenders will tell you take 17 or 21 days. Fully on that, I'm telling you that's an old style lender. They're not nimble and they're not going to serve you well in the process. Highly recommend that you work with someone that's nimble and can get you that underwriting approval on a piece of paper so that your offer is presented very strong and you have a higher probability of closing the deal. You can thank me later for that. The second reason why a contract will cancel is because the buyer isn't satisfied with the condition of the property. When they made the offer, they didn't know all the things that they found in their home inspection or their sewer line inspection or their roof inspection. And they can do a couple things. They can say, whoa, this is too much for me. I don't want to take this house on. There's too much deferred maintenance. Or they can say, hey, seller, will you reduce your price to accommodate some of these things? Or can you give us a repair credit? Or can you do some of these repairs? Now, a lot of these sellers are like, no way, I'm not going to cooperate with you. My house is fine. You're just being picky. So the deal gets canceled because the buyer is not in agreement with the condition of the property. And the seller doesn't want to move off his price or want to have to do or make any credits for the repairs. There are ways around that. I just started instituting this year, and that is I comp, meaning I pay for a home inspection report on every single property that I list. And the reason why I do that is because I want the buyer to know what they're buying. We want full transparency in the transaction. So when an offer is presented on my seller's behalf, we will hand over the home inspection, all the seller disclosures on the property, so that the buyer will know right away whether or not this is something they want to take on or not. It also minimizes all those repair requests because we're like, hey, we're selling this thing as is. You know what the property's burdened with. You know up front. We ain't negotiating. It's a beautiful thing. And also, I think it's very fair for the buyer because it is expensive going through these home inspections. And if the house isn't something they want to take on, at least they know up front, because all this stuff is disclosed to them. It really minimizes buyers backing out because they're not satisfied with the condition of the property. Love this. Okay, I need your help. I need you to subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to get to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. As you know, I am a full-time realtor. I probably work about 80 hours a week, and this is kind of my give back to society. I'm trying to help educate both sellers and buyers out there, and I could really use your help. So please subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. The third reason why a contract gets canceled is because the buyer gets cold feet, okay? And there's a lot you can't do about this, but there is a lot you can't do. So as a listing agent, I kind of like to know the narrative, like why are the buyers buying the property? What's their motivation? And we've got into this habit as listing agents by using these little lockbox guys, right? And I just did a video, which I will put up on the screen right here. And I highly recommend that you watch that video. I will link it down in the description down below. The video is called No Lockbox, okay? This is a very impersonal process. Buyers will come in with their buyer's agent. The listing agent doesn't really have a vibe or really understand who the buyer is or what their motivation is. So if I'm a listing agent and I have buyers that are coming through the property, I'm going to be asking those questions. You know, how serious are you? Where are you coming from? And their agent is also trying to get their offer accepted. So they'll offer a lot of information up front. But if you have that lockbox, you're not able as an agent, a listing agent, to get a vibe on whether or not they're serious or not. Or maybe they're having some difficulties getting over something about the neighborhood, or maybe it's a school district, and you can be there to help get them across the finish line. So nothing really you can do about someone just flipping out, not wanting to move forward. But as a listing agent, I think if you don't do the lockbox and you are present and you are assisting and helping them overcome some of those obstacles, the higher chance of success. Okay, the fourth reason why a contract gets canceled is because the monies never make it into title or escrow to close, okay? Well, I hate this. Especially international buyers. Now, I've done a lot of successful international transactions, but you always confirm where the money's coming from and if the banks are trusted, and you can rely on your escrow company or a trusted title company to tell you if it looks legit or not, or if they've had experience with those banks, okay? If you're receiving an offer from a buyer and they're using a substantial amount of their retirement funds or their stock portfolio funds, you know, I've seen some of those things not liquidate or it's not done in a timely manner. It's really important that if you are a seller or a buyer to confirm, like you spend a lot of time on that, okay? Don't rush to sign that contract until you can verify and triple verify and understand the motivation of that buyer. Okay, number 5 is that the seller and the buyer may not have the authority to purchase the property. So if you're working with a seller, it's really important that you ask them for a statement of information. Just ask your title rep for that. You want to make sure that the seller is who they say they are and that there's no significant liens or that they can actually cover the sale, meaning that they don't have huge tax liens where there could be a deficit and the property doesn't clear, okay? Really important if you're a listing agent that you understand who you're working with. And if you're dealing with a buyer or even the seller, if they're in a trust, you need to make sure that the people that are in that trust are who they say they are. So you're going to ask for a trust cert, or you're going to ask for the full trust, and you're going to have escrow or title review it in completion to make sure that the signing parties on that document are who they say they are and have the authority to purchase your house. You will be relying heavily on your title company to help clear title. Get ahead of this early on in the process, whether you're a seller, a buyer, listing agent, or a buyer's agent. Like, this is super important. The sooner you get ahead of this, the better. Now, I told you in the beginning of the video that I have this great track record, but I had 2 transactions cancel on me. So the first transaction, this was painful. We only had a very short contingency period and we were ready to close the contract, and the buyer calls and demands a $40,000 reduction on price. Now, I think most listing agents would have negotiated with them, because it was easy. We were going to close that day. I just couldn't do that. My fiduciary responsibility was to get the best price and terms for my seller. So I looked at my seller. I'm like, hey, we got 10 other offers that are in backup position. I know we've been through a lot with this, buyer. I say we tell them to go pound sand and we're not going to negotiate, and we go after some other buyers. And so we did that. A cancellation of escrow. He was fit to be tied because he wanted to negotiate. But I'm sorry, it was a lot of work for us to get that second buyer, but my seller did get $40,000. So I will push the contract and push some of the terms if I'm in a strong position. And that's not cool to ask for a $40,000 reduction on price when they already knew everything up front, because we did provide a home inspection up front. That's not cool. Don't mess with me. And don't mess with my seller. Oh my gosh, that was such a nightmare. The second transaction that canceled on me, I was a listing agent. The buyer made an offer in a trust. Of course, we checked the trust out. They were who they said they were. We had all contingencies removed. And then out of nowhere, we get an attorney letter halting the transaction because the buyer's spouse was prohibiting the other to continue with the process. Now, that spouse was not named on the trust, but we did let them out of the contract. They did have to forfeit some earnest money deposit. We did have a backup offer that proved to be successful, thankfully. Okay, the point in even telling you that is let you know that there are some things you just can't control. And if there's also some things that you can, and you can minimize this transaction canceling because you can take the additional steps that I mentioned in this video. I'm not guaranteeing you that you will not cancel the contract, but you have a higher probability if you do the things that I recommend in this video. If you are a buyer and you want to cancel the contract and you haven't removed contingencies, you don't automatically get your earnest money deposit back. Now, I know a lot of you believe you do, but you don't. And a lot of sellers believe they have to, but you don't. Okay? Not encouraging you not to do that. I'm just telling you how it's done. Okay? So both the buyer and the seller have to agree to remove your earnest money deposit. So if you are a buyer, make sure you don't anger that seller, because they can get really snotty and they can say, no, I'm not going to sign that and remove your earnest money deposit. I'm not going to do it. And it can just sit there for eternity. And the only recourse you have as a buyer is to go through arbitration and mediation. And I've never, ever have heard of any buyer getting all their money back. Okay. It's usually there's a portion. My point in even telling you that is to scare you a little bit on purpose. Like, it's not good to be a jerk when you're buying a house or selling a house, okay? It's collaboration. We want to work together. And it's important that you respect both sides, actually. All right, sellers out there, if you're just like, hey, I'm done with this process. I don't want to sell my house. I don't like my buyer. Okay, realize, sellers out there, just because you want to cancel the contract, you also need to get approval, and you got to get a document signed that both parties are in agreement to cancel the contract. And that's true for the buyer and the seller. If they want to cancel the contract, it's by mutual agreement. So sellers, if you have all the contingencies removed and you cancel the contract and you're not cooperating, that buyer could come after you for liquidated damages. They might have a tremendous amount of money invested into the inspection process, or maybe they gave notice to their landlord and now, they have monies that are due to them, and now they have moving costs and they got to find another rental. So my point in even bringing that up to you is that the buyer and the seller, in my opinion, should really try to work together and make it a collaborative effort to close on the property. And some of the tips that I've given you in this video should really help out to achieve success. All right, I know that was a long one. I hope you got some benefit. And if you did, subscribe, smash the like button. I'd really appreciate it. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.